Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook. Again, cover to cover. This one is from, guess what year? That's right. This book is from 1940. 40, before we got into World War II. American history textbook, I would think, for fifth graders from before our involvement in World War II during the Great Depression. This is what kids were being taught in a Catholic school for American history. Chapter 8, Section 2, Making It Easier to Travel. This is about inventions. Travel in olden days. Everybody likes to travel. Today, it is easy to go from one part of the country to another. There was a time when travel was not only difficult, but it was slow and dangerous. When they say today, remember, they're talking about 1940. Suppose you had lived in the time of George Washington. How would you have enjoyed taking a trip on the flying machine? This flying machine was considered to be the last word in speed, the fastest way to travel. It was really merely a stagecoach. It made the 90-mile trip from New York to Philadelphia in 3 days. Was that speedy? It took the flying machine 72 hours to go 90 miles. That rate of travel was about 1.25 miles an hour. The average walking rate was about 1 mile in 15 minutes. Travel and communication. Travel by water. The most common means of travel in the early days was by water. There were 3 reasons why this was so. Few of the settlements were very far inland. Most of the settlements were easily reached from the sea. There were many navigatable streams. These became the natural routes between settlements. Between the rivers, often there were lowlands. These were used as portages, places between waterways where goods and boats may be carried to another stream are called portages. Few bridges had been built in the early days. Boats called ferries were often used to carry people and goods across streams. Shallow streams were often crossed by fording. When the horses or oxen swole or walk through the shallow water, it was called fording the stream. A stream could not be easily forded if the water was high. Later, toll bridges were built. A small fee or toll was collected for the privileges of crossing the bridge. Travel by land. The early settlers had so many important things to do that they gave little attention to road building. Horses were used for riding as pack animals. The pack horse was useful to carry goods along trail that led through the mountains. Sleighs and sleds were commonly used in New England and the northern part of the middle colonies. It was far easier to carry goods over frozen ground than it was to haul goods over muddy roads. The stagecoach was the means of passenger travel. A carriage or coach mounted on wheels was called a stagecoach. After the stage was drawn by 4 or more strong horses, not every man could be a stagecoach driver. But often a stagecoach was driven by 4 strong horses. Not every man could be a stagecoach driver because a driver needed skill to drive so many horses and to keep them pulling together. The driver must be an honest man. He was trusted with the care of the passengers, mail, and packages. He needed to be quick thinker, for ever so many things might happen on a journey. He needed to know how to decide what was best to do at all times. He needed to be ready to act quickly. He needed to tact, because he needed tact. He had to know just how to deal with the Indians. There was always a danger that savage Indians might surround a stagecoach at some lonely place. 1940. Early roads often followed Indian trails. The roads were dusty in dry weather and muddy whenever rain fell. As travel became more popular and more necessary, there arose the need for better roads. There was but little money to spend for materials or for labor to build better roads. If you're enjoying what you're hearing right now, if you're interested in listening to this sort of a reading, and that's really it, please subscribe and please like. My name is John Michael at the Context of Everything Media Network. This problem was solved by cutting sturdy trees. The strong logs were placed close together across the road. The wheels of the wagon and the stagecoach could not sink so easily in such a road. These log roads were called corduroy roads. Corduroy roads is a kind of cloth with ridges. This was a good name for the log roads. Traveled on corduroy roads was far better than on dirt road, but it was rather rough riding. Later, better and smoother roads were built. Sand, gravel, and crushed stone were used to make hard, smooth road. These roads cost more to build than a corduroy road. The colonists solved this problem by charging a tax or toll for riders and vehicles using the road. These toll roads became called pikes. Often they were called turnpikes. A rider or wagon that was not willing or not able to pay a toll would have to turn back when they reached the toll gate. Right. In Super Mario Kart at Toad's Turnpike, there are pay stations, please note. The people of New England and the Middle Colonies gave more attention to building roads than did the people of the South. Southern planters were content because it was pleasant to ride horseback along a trail. Nearly every plantation had its own wharf. Here goods could be loaded and unloaded, so the Southern planter was not as dependent upon roads as the colonists of New England and Middle Colonies. The Cumberland Road. One of the greatest old roads was the Cumberland Road. It was also called the National Road. This road was built in the United States government in 1811. It first ran from Cumberland, Maryland, across the mountains to Wheeling, Virginia. Later, this road was built westward and is shown on the map. The National Road reached the Mississippi River. There's that Cumberland Road for you. You can pause if you want to look any further. And we're back. This road was an easy path for settlers moving into the West. The road was often crowded with emigrant trains of covered wagons and straggling cattle. Groups of wagons moved into another part of the country were called emigrant trains. Stagecoaches carried passengers and mail over the Cumberland Road. Heavy freight was also carried in large canvas-covered wagons. These were called Conestoga wagons. Conestoga wagons, Conestoga wagons. They were large and sturdily built. These wagons hauled from 1 ton to 2 tons of freight. The Conestoga wagons were pulled by 4 or 6 strong horses. Bells of various tunes jingled pleasantly as the teams traveled over the road. All travel in the early days was slow, difficult, and uncomfortable and expensive. Whenever it was possible, people traveled by sailboat. Robert Fulton. How people traveled. There have been very little change. If you're enjoying this reading, please subscribe. Robert Fulton. How people traveled. There had been very little change in the way people traveled. Men had used the same modes of travel for thousands of years. They traveled on foot, were drawn by animals, or sailed over water. The steamboat marked the first big change in the manner of water travel. One great improvement followed another rapidly. Within 100 years after 1807, man's ways of traveling were completely changed. The man who helped to change men's idea of travel was Robert Fulton. He invented the steamboat. John Finch and others built steamboats, but Fulton built the kind of steamboat that came into general use, the Clermont. After years of planning, Robert Fulton had a boat built in New York by a New York shipbuilder. Then he advertised the fact that his boat would make it the first trip in August 1807. It was a steam up the Hudson River from New York to Albany. When the day came, a crowd gathered to see the strange craft. Fulton named his steamboat the Clermont. This was the name of Robert Livingston's lovely estate on the Hudson. The crowd called the steamboat Fulton's Folly. They were sure that it would never be able to move from the dock. A successful steamboat. The signal was given, and the paddle wheels began to turn. The Clermont moved ahead. The paddle wheels stopped, and the Clermont drifted astern. The crowd roared with laughter at the silly craft as it tossed on the stream. They did not laugh long. The damage was repaired, and once again the paddle wheels churned the water. Steadily up the river moved the Clermont. She caused as much amazement as the Hudson's half moon nearly 200 years before. The steamer's tall stack gave out a column of black smoke. Sparks flew high in the air. Now and then there was a burst of flame. People thought the boat would blow up. But, to their astonishment, the trip to Albany was safely made. The Clermont began to make regular trips. It took the Clermont less than a day and a half to go the 150 miles. Its rate was between 3 and 4 miles per hour. Today, we would consider this very, very slow. People were delighted with the Clermont when it made the journey between Albany and New York in a day and a half. The stagecoach journey took about a week. Transportation was growing speedy. Progress of the steamboat. Steamboats soon began to take place of sailing vessels. Like all new inventions, some people fought against them. The captains of the sailboats on the Hudson saw that they were going to lose passengers and freight trade. Sometimes these captains tried to run their boats into the Clermont. They could not stop the progress of steam-driven boats and ships. The steamboat was soon in use on many rivers and lakes. Engines were put into sea-going ships as well. First, they used sails to help the engines. The steamship Great Western crossed the Atlantic Ocean in 1838. It used only steam power. It would be impossible to tell how much the invention of the steamboat added to the wealth of the country. The Erie Canal. Fulton's canal schemes. Another one of Fulton's ideas had to do with canals. Goods could be carried easier and cheaper by water than over land in Fulton's time. The United States has many rivers and lakes, which form a splendid water route. Unfortunately, these waterways did not always connect with one another. There were often stretches of land between them. Fulton felt that it would not be too hard to cut canals and connect the waterways. Canals could pay for themselves and help the country. The rich products of the western farms could be brought to the cities on the coasts at small cost. The things farmers needed could be sent to him cheaply from the eastern cities. Many other people thought as Robert Fulton did about canals. If you're enjoying the content, please subscribe. DeWitt Clinton. DeWitt Clinton was interested in a canal in his own state of New York. Lake Erie is on the western side of New York. The map on the top of the page shows how Lake Erie connects with Lake Ontario. Together, the Great Lakes form a magnificent waterway into the heart of the United States. Oh my God. That's a big canal. I didn't know about this. Why didn't anyone tell me? Look at that canal. That's humongous. That is an astonishingly long man-made waterway. Well, that's interesting. Running down along the eastern side of New York, the deep, wide Hudson River. At Albany, the Mohawk River flows into the Hudson River. This tributary of the Hudson River has its source near Lake Erie. Between Lake Erie and the Hudson River the land is nearly level. There are no mountains to cross. DeWitt Clinton felt very strongly that the canal should be built to connect the Mohawk and Hudson rivers with Lake Erie. This would provide a water route from the far ends of the Great Lake to the Atlantic Ocean, which would make New York City a great port. Clinton's ditch. The plan was very simple. To carry out was very difficult. Well over 300 miles of canal had to be dug. Whoa. The water in Lake Erie is on a higher level than the water in the Hudson River. A canal with many locks would have to be built. A lock is an enclosure between two gates in a canal or a stream. Boats are lowered and raised from one water level to another. Interesting. By the use of locks. Definitely worth looking up on YouTube. Pretty cool looking. Locks are expensive to build. The canal planned by Clinton would cost millions of dollars. Nevertheless, DeWitt Clinton talked about the canal constantly. He tried to get the United States government to build it. Statesmen in Washington said that this was New York's job, as a canal would be entirely within the state, and the state would benefit. Clinton was a politician and finally elected governor of New York. Then he succeeded in getting New York State to build a canal. It took 8 years to build the Erie Canal, and it cost $8 million to construct this waterway. The Erie Canal opened in 1825. The marriage of the waters. When the work was finished, there was a gay ceremony. Governor DeWitt Clinton and the party of guests journeyed to Buffalo. That city was that at the Lake Erie end of the canal. There was a party the party went on the boat aboard a gaily decorated canal boat. The boat was drawn by tow horses, which walked along the tow path on the banks of the canal. The horses pulled or towed the boat by means of strong ropes attached to the boat. People all along the way cheered the boat. At Albany, the boat left Lake Erie and floated down the Hudson River to New York Harbor. Here, a cask of water taken from Lake Erie was poured into the Atlantic Ocean. This ceremony was called the Marriage of the Waters. This is probably my favorite chapter of this whole book so far. The effect of the canal. New York City became America's largest and richest city, partly because of the Lake Erie Canal. The vast trade of the central states might have been forced to go down the Mississippi River to reach the Sea of Erie Canal. If the Erie Canal could not be built. The Erie Canal also helped the West. That region found it an easy market in the East for its produce. This brought more and more settlers to the fertile prairie lands. Along the length of the canal, busy cities such as Buffalo and Rochester and Syracuse and Utica grew and prospered. About 100 years after it was built, the Erie Canal was rebuilt. It is now known as New York State Barge Canal. A barge is a large flat-bottomed boat that uses to carry freight on rivers and canals. The success of the Erie Canal was caused a wave of canal building. Pennsylvania and Maryland joined in building the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. This canal was dug to connect Ohio River and the Chesapeake Bay. Many shorter canals were built throughout the central United States. The coming of railroads caused the decline in canal building. Canals, canals, canals. That was pretty interesting. Please subscribe if you made it this far. God bless. Have a good day.